it's a longer question in a way, because the whole policy, it's plenty of elements in it, and it's very difficult for me to see what you mean by implementation of policy, because each of us has its own implementation. Country has its own plans. We are coming to its particular areas and with different projects. So its implementation is going, as I thought some results are, but the international community is still on development cooperation. It's very much divided, a lot of elements. And for me, it's very difficult to answer your question. Perhaps after 10 years we will come again back to the same what you said, but a bit better quality. So it is some development challenge that we are going.
Patrick?
Just two remarks. One, for Helmut, of course, for Helmut, I am in favor of contracyclical loans. I have been associated to the creation of it. But it is a very useful instrument because it is counter-cyclical and not only the compensation of a shortfall. Okay. But it's linked to loans and new loans, so it is progressive. And even at the Agence Française de Développement, there are still few such loans. Okay, it could be generalized. But for countries we received ODA in form of grants, it's not applicable by definition. And so that's the reason we need some other instruments for those poorest countries and not using loans on. The general question of Mehmet about the category and the answer, I agree with Andres Pival that the category exists. We can hope it's useful. But a category has binary benefits. You are or you are not in the category. You have EBA or you have not. But when you have the possibility to use the criteria of the category in a smoother fashion, progressively, as I suggested with the aid allocation criteria, you can rely on the principle of the category but make the application not so sharp. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. There is no lack of help or trying to help. We are in the 10th EDF. How much money is that over the last 38 years? About 210 billion euro given to the ACP countries, 78. Now, the majority of the 48 LDCs are in the ACP. So we have piled lots of money into the LDC, ACP countries. What has happened? Nothing. In 2001 to 2003, I helped Pascal Lamy, he came from the trade side, to create something called Anything But Arms. We then rapidly changed it to Anything But Farms. And so when we created Anything But Arms, it was to help LDC countries to export without duty into the EU. Well, the things that the LDCs can export are agricultural products and a bit of mineral resources. But then we told them, oops, sorry, agricultural products, physiosanitary standards. So we'll give you some money to improve your capacity to add value, and then we will import. So how many people have benefited from Anything But Arms? I can count it on my hand. So what is it that we are doing? We go out to help, we pour money down these countries, and for some extraordinary reason, nothing happens. Well, tell me why it's not true.
We write the African Economic Outlook. We find that, for example, the least developed countries in Africa have raised their growth rates remarkably.
But the level of poverty?
Over the last 10 years, and the level of poverty.
Has also increased.
And look at the MDG monitoring reports. You will find uneven progress, but you find progress. So you cannot say nothing has happened.
All right.
there is much literature about the benefits of aid. Unless you focus on growth, but look at the MDGs, what aid has done to the specific MDGs, because aid is heterogeneous in its targets, it has been fairly successful.
Aid has been successful, but poverty has increased.
Let us please stop.
500 million.
Excuse me. I do not want to allow dialogue here. I mean, something only specific to two persons.
Might I ask the audience a question?
Well, I don't think so because we have the word on. For
How did China remove 300 million people from poverty? 500 million. How?
So Richard, it's your turn now.
Well, there are a number of complexities. I don't want to jump to either aid is responsible for everything or aid achieved nothing. Aid is clearly marginal. But personally, I think it can be useful and so forth. But I wanted to make 3 points, and I'll make them very briefly. LDC specificity, of course. Look at the recent situation of these countries. Very diverse, but the whole point is common obstacles. And I think in that sense, what our new understanding has been in the last 15 years is much better on the obstacles. New challenges, I'm getting towards, Farouk, your point. I don't know how much attention you gave in 1980 to climate change, to other environmental issues, to remittances, to MDGs. All these, to me, are important new elements, and they're ones which many LDCs have done important things themselves and have had some success. Not as much, because we've still got the relative gap problem. But no one, I hope, has looked at the statistics of LDCs and said, all we can see is rising poverty. Isn't it terrible? You can't say that. You can see lots of improvements, but widening gaps with the world, which is a large part. What about implementation? What about the future? I want to mention China in a different way, and I want to mention it with the BRICS. I think the negotiations on the old polarizations between, in this case, the LDCs and the industrial countries is a very depressing story. Not totally depressing. There are tiny gaps, tiny elements of progress. But to my mind, speaking as someone from an industrial, so-called industrial country, much less than was in the interest of the industrial countries, although I doubt many of the revealed preference shows that many industrial countries have not taken much action. Where will the BRICS stand in this? Where will not only China, but India, Brazil, these countries, as they become bigger players in the international system? I think it's very open. I don't think one can either say, oh, a whole new dynamic force for good in terms of negotiation, or a certainty of tough-minded, only self-interested. So I think the agenda of issues of the least developed countries and what come out of this conference will be important, but I hope the BRICS and other emerging countries will take them seriously, as well as the traditional developed countries. I will end by saying one thing. Although we all agree, it's been said, we won't argue with the categories, and I was very glad to hear the Eurocrat commissioners say that. The trouble is that the World Bank and the IMF still doesn't accept the categories. And I think they should. I think they would make a difference if they were to accept it, and it would be a very practical step and a lead for perhaps taking some of the program of action proposals more seriously by many of the donors. Thank you.
I think we can, for another, at the most 10 minutes, go on with questions. I'll take 3 more questions and then return back to the panel, if there are any. There is a question there.
Thank you, Chair. I think we have a unique panel here, which represents head of the UN intergovernmental agencies, the political leaders in a big community. We have the academics and also many other representatives of various stakeholders group over here. And this is the final session for the day. We started off with the implementation issue, so we again came back to the implementation issue. It somehow is a full circle. And we are entering almost the third day or the fourth day of our stay in Istanbul. I think it is time to do some reality check. That all the discussions which we are doing during the last 72 hours, how do they conform with the actual negotiations which is going on? And the news or the things which are percolating from those closed doors is that it is becoming increasingly difficult to hold on to the threshold level achievements which have been achieved either in the UN process, intergovernmental process, or elsewhere. We hear that the Hong Kong Declaration on the WTO ministerial is getting increasingly difficult to get reflected in the Istanbul Program of Action.
Could you be more precise on the question, please?
I'm being precise. Am I not? Hong Kong Declaration is very precise. Or my question is not precise. I'm yet to get to the question. So we do not get the Hong Kong Declaration reflected in the Program of Action. We also do not get, for that matter, the quantitative commitments in terms of ODA flow now reflected. Till the meeting was taking place, we were told that no new money will be available. Now the question comes up whether the old money had to be reconfirmed or not. That is how it is done. So the basic point over here is that what would be the value addition of Istanbul Program of Action once we all go back to our capital? So the question to the panel would be that what are the new value addition they see in the coming months as we go back to our capital from here? And is it a question at the end of the day of instruments, or is the question of revisiting the paradigms from the vulnerability perspective? Or at the end of the day, it is the political will and the institutions, the global governance, how it is fashioned, which really creating all the distortion, as we say. And I do not come from the perspective that nothing has happened and nothing has changed. So what is actually the value addition we are going back home with?
Okay. I think there is no more question. So anyone want to respond from the panel? I mean, we have lost half of the panel anyhow.
You can address it here. No problem.
Thank you very much, and I will be very brief because, of course, my remit is not nearly as broad as the other panelists. But I think in response specifically to what the colleague has just raised as a question, and referring to what Sir Richard said in his comments, there are new elements in the program of action. There are issues that were not foreseen. Unfortunately, you're of course right that some of the same issues were on the table 40 years ago, but there has been progress made. And I'll mention, of course, remittances is one example where many individuals, many families have come out of poverty as a result of remittances. And for the very first time, that role is being recognized in the program of action. Now, I don't want to suggest in any way that remittances are a substitute for official aid or that they necessarily scale